Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome, everyone, to In This Place. I am Tammy Sawyer, the speaker in residence here at Clayborn Temple. I would like to first give out a couple of thank yous. Thank you to Anasa Troutman for her love and support of this event series. If you weren't at the first one, you didn't get to hear the origin story, but basically we came together to talk about how to have conversations around truth and reconciliation in a historic place that was at the center of the civil rights movement here in Memphis. And so it is an honor to see once again a diverse crowd, diverse amongst so many different identity layers, age, race, gender, religion, ethnicity. And I'm just really excited to today embark upon a conversation that brings into focus the 200th anniversary, the 200th birthday of the city of Memphis in Shelby County. We'll have many events for hashtag Memphis 200. And it's gonna be exciting, and there's gonna be fireworks, and Cardi B is coming to town, and but we really wanted to sit and talk with our neighbors about one of the most underspoken, underlying issues that we as a city face, and that's the inability to reconcile 200 years of racism and classism that have shaped this city and bring us to where we are today. One of the most powerful figures in Memphis' history once said, "I'd rather go down in history as one lone Negro who dared to tell the government that it had done a dastardly thing than to save my skin by taking back what I said." That was Ida B. Wells. And while we all know Mrs. Wells in our history and we know her name, a large part of her legacy has gone missing. People don't know that she was a contemporary of W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. When I was in college, we debated about Du Bois and Washington. Who was right about how to handle the Negro problem? What we didn't debate was the fact that there was this powerhouse of a woman right from my hometown, part of the conversation as well. And so who gets to tell history? Who gets to decide what are the historical moments that we need to recognize and honor? That is a topic that I myself have addressed, and many of you alongside me with the Confederate statues, a debate that continues to rage across our country. Where do artifacts belong? Who decides what's important? Well, today, you'll get to hear from so many people what's important to them. And very often in Memphis, we talk about two groups of identities, Black people and white people. So I was very intentional in inviting a voice that is very often unheard, and that of the Latinx community. Memphis has one of the fastest growing populations in the South of Spanish speakers, of Latinx people. And it is time for us to include them in our conversations about the next 200 years, as equally as we talk about truth and reconciliation amongst Blacks and whites. And so, tonight we're going to come together on this stage, and we're going to talk about where we've been and where we want to go, whose stories matter, all of our stories matter. And we're going to give equal voice from high school students such as Allison to educators such as Iris and historical figures such as Ms. Turner, and everyone that you'll see on the stage has fought for underserved, undervalued voices to be a part of the narrative for equality and for equity. Before I invite our panelists on stage, I would like to thank our translators today. Iris, who is one of our panelists, reached out to me and asked, could she organize to have volunteer translators? That was something I had never considered, right, in this conversation. And it pushed us to provide that space, right? And then also to realize, right, I think about white and black, but not about other people who don't identify as either and how I can welcome them to any space that I'm in. So I'd like to thank Iris for organizing, and to Rosa Mina, to Amber Duran, and to Virginia Falvey, 3 women in the back who are all providing translation services for us. Panelists, they will be translating, and people are listening through earpieces to what we're saying. And that to me just is dynamic, and it's really the spirit of what we are going for with these conversations. So join me in welcoming to the stage, first, Miss Elaine Lee Turner. If you don't know the story of Mrs. Turner and her family, you're going to hear so much of it tonight, I hope. And just know that this is a historical figure, an icon living, sitting with us today. Thank you. Mr. Frank Johnson. Frank is a dear friend and also an activist, and he does unique work in environmental racism, and I hope that he'll share part of that story with us this evening. Ms. Iris Mercado. Iris currently works at Rhodes College, and she works in the Memphis Center, and she is also an educator and an activist, and has taught me so much about Black and Latinx intersectionality, and I'm always thankful for your push and your work. You're kind of in my seat though, so you gotta move over one. Thank you. Dr. Roz Nichols. Dr. Roz is one of the fiercest women in Memphis. If you can't tell, turn around, show them how fierce she is. But she's not just fierce for her fashion sense. She is a leader in social justice and in theological liberation work. She's also operations director here at Clayborn Temple, and she and her team are responsible for this space coming together, and we thank you for that today. And last, but certainly not least, representing the next generation, Miss Allison Smith. Allison is currently a student at White Station High School, and I'm very excited. We started with the last series, making sure that we had a youth voice, and we've committed to that, and it has just been a powerful part of my experience. So let us begin this conversation in this place. Some of the questions we're going to dive into, you all had an opportunity to talk at your tables in this way. As I mentioned, one of the major purposes of In This Place is to begin to build in Memphis a model for how to have tough conversations and get us to a place of real reconciliation along lines of race and class. Very often we have these conversations in silos or with a few allies here and there. And so it's really great for us to have this opportunity at our tables to turn and talk. You'll have time at the end for one more question. But now we're going to dive in. And the first question is, panelists, introduce yourself. Include your personal layers of identity. Tell us where you were born and what part of Memphis you live in today.
I am Roz Nichols. I am a native Memphian. When asked to share the layers of my identity, I am a pastor. I pastor Freedom's Chapel Christian Church that is in the 381. Thank you, someone applauded. Amen. Thank you. This is the 38111 zip code. I am obviously doing work here gratefully at Clayborn Temple under the great leadership of Anasa Troutman. I also am very deeply invested in my community. So for over 2 decades, I've done work around domestic and relationship violence after a childhood friend of mine, Rosemarie Lane Celeste Pleasure, was gunned down in the driveway of her Midtown Memphis home. Indigenous people say as long as you call someone's name, they're still present with you. So I speak Rose's name in this place. And out of that, that led to other work, other great. So I'm also a part of an activist for sexual justice around body and image. I do work with MICA, Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope, which I like to tell people who think MICA is like some new brand new thing. We're really a continuation of MICA that grew out of activism in that day. And I'm just very deeply invested and committed in my city. I'm a graduate. I was raised in the 38106 and the 38126. I went to Georgia Avenue Elementary School, Campus School, Sherwood Junior High, before there were middle schools, the Booker T. Washington High School, Lamorne College, 3rd generation, thank you very much, and Virginia Union University. So I consider myself Black all the way through. And I love my home. I could be anywhere. I'm single and a dog lover. That's who I am.
Hello. My name is Iris Ashelen Mercado. I say that in that way because my middle name, Ashelen, is a Mapuche name, and it means happiness in Mapudungun, which is the language spoken by the Mapuche. And at the time, before I was born, parents were not allowed to name their child whatever they wanted. It had to be a Catholic name, and that happens when you're under a dictatorship. And so when that was over, parents were finally able to name their child, and naming is a very powerful thing. Forcing someone to say your name properly is a very powerful thing. And I know a lot of us here have experienced that in many different ways. So some folks may know me as Iris, but today, and for the past couple of years, I have been taking ownership over my name intentionally, and it is Iris. And I taught Spanish, so I have tricks on how to roll your R if you were not taught. Which is also a gender thing, but I'm not, anyway. But I am an immigrant. I was born and raised in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So I am South American, descendant of indigenous community, but I can't identify one in particular. So I don't claim one. But I do have roots in South America. I am what I say, undocuqueer, it's a hashtag, which is undocumented and queer. I have been fortunate enough to be one of the few that have access to DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So I am DACA-mented, so I have a 2-year pinky promise that I won't be deported because I'm such a good person, but that can go away at any moment, as we've seen in the news. And I'm a first-generation college student. I went to Rhodes College. It was the only school that I applied to because I knew that I wanted to be in Memphis. I wanted to work with the Memphis community, and that for me was the only choice. So thank God it worked out. And I work there now, and I've been an educator. I've been an activist for a very long time. I would say now going on 13 years. Something that I started when I was very young, and that happens when your livelihood is threatened. You want to stand up, not just to other people in your community, but then legislators that are making these decisions. And so I've been an advocate since I was 12, I think was the first time that we went to lobby and then train other people. Again, also a powerful experience. And I'm speaking at this speed because our interpreters are doing this, which means slow down. And I'm a Southerner and Argentine, so I speak very, very fast. So this will be...
One. My name is Elaine Turner. I was born not far from Memphis in Lexington, Tennessee. My parents moved to Memphis when I was 5 years old, and I've been here most of the time since then. I'm a product of North Memphis. I went to Carnes Elementary School and the Manassas High School. But as you know, back in those days, 1960s or so, we had to go to whatever school was in our neighborhood. That was a black school, that is. So Carnes Schools was the school in my community. Manassas was the closest black high school. And so we had to ride the bus over to Manassas High School, even though we passed by a couple of white high schools on the way there. But that was the best thing that could have happened to me, to go to Manassas High School. After Manassas, I went to Lemoyne College and majored in English. And from college, I taught school for a few years. And then later on, after moving to a couple of cities, came back to Memphis and taught out in the county for a while. And after resigning from teaching, I decided to do something different. I realized that many of our young people, especially African American youth, did not know their history, and I thought someone needed to share that history with them, the history right here around them in their own city. And since that was not done, had not been done, as far as tourism was concerned, then my sister and I, Joan, we started Heritage Tours 35 years ago. And so we have shared that history for many, many years to thousands of school children and people from all over the world. And it has been an honor to do that because we have a marvelous history here in Memphis that we didn't learn in school at all. But someone needed to share that history with them, and it wasn't in the curriculum when I taught school, so we had to develop a curriculum for heritage tours for the tourists and for people here in Memphis to learn that history. And we've been able to share that and meet people from all over the world, and it has really been a privilege doing that. We are also, I am the director at Slave Haven Underground Railroad Museum. It is a house, it was a safe house on the Underground Railroad, and it is really a jewel here in Memphis because, yes, thank you, because we don't know of another location like that in the South, but we have it here in Memphis, and we are able to share the Underground Railroad story at Slave Haven Underground Railroad Museum. So that is something that we do every day, as well as take people on tours throughout the city of Memphis, as well as to Henning, Tennessee, to the Alex Haley Museum. That's very close to us. So those are some things that I've been involved in. Of course, I've been in the community, in civil rights, ever since my high school days, and I'll talk more about that later. But that has just been one of the things that has guided me throughout my life since my teenage years, being involved in civil rights and politics and everything else, getting other people elected. I didn't want to be involved in politics per se, but helping to register people to vote and helping people to get elected, all of those things that I thought was necessary. So that is something that I'm continuing to do as well as share the history of Memphis. Thank you.
Well, good evening. My name is Frank Johnson. I'm a native South Memphian, and I'm from all over South Memphis, from the area behind us that was once known as Foot Homes and Clayborn Homes to Lauderdale and South Parkway, and over by the depot in the Alcee Ball community. Norris Elementary, Corey Junior High, and I was bused to Overton High School for because of desegregation busing. Came across a wonderful black woman out there named Dr. Lula McEwen Hedgeman, who actually changed my life and got me into music. And I ended up doing opera, still kind of do it now, getting ready to go back overseas in a couple of months to Milan, Italy. I've been to Germany and Austria, Amsterdam, a couple of other places doing that type of music. I've taught school, I've been a banker, I've been a couple of things. Kind of fell into doing environmental justice. About 4 or 5 years ago, my oldest sister collapsed after she got home from the Med. She was a nurse for almost 30 years. And they discovered a cancerous tumor, I think on her frontal lobe. Now, what's crazy about this is this is exactly the same cancerous tumor that my mom had in the 1990s. During the course of her going through treatment for that, my auntie was diagnosed with brain cancer in the back of her head. And then my middle sister had to have a partial hysterectomy. What I began to find out, and what we kind of always suspected, was in the neighborhood and the communities around the depot, this was commonplace. And not only was it commonplace, but there was research that had been done. We have some of the highest cancer rates in the country. Also, what went along with that was that among the children that grew up over there were mental health issues, there were learning disabilities, areas of the brain that had basically been attacked. These areas of the brain control certain aspects of behavior. And what we just didn't know is that almost 100,000 people were affected by this one site. And even now, supposedly, there's still a nuclear warhead in the ground over there that they can't find. And so for all of these decades, these things have been getting done, not only just on my side of South Memphis, but you have President's Island. We have an unprecedented number of autoimmune diseases over there, the same things that we have. And right in the middle, 38127 has the highest content of lead in their drinking water. So when I go back to teach at LaRose Elementary School, I see these children, with the same behavior disorders that I saw at Norris Elementary almost 30 years in advance. And then they all have the eczema, they all have the skin disorders and the asthma. And I'm just thinking to myself that this cannot be a coincidence. I have friends that are my age now. A good portion of my friends that I grew up with cannot function. And they were cast off and they were called bad and they didn't have fathers. The usual excuses that they put on our black families. But what we found out is that this isn't the case. And so that kind of just put me in the fight, not only from my family's aspect, but from all of these people that I knew and that I loved that were affected by this. And then you have more generations that are coming up that are affected by these issues, and nobody is talking about it. They're being treated like disposable children and disposable people. And so from that, I just based my work from that now, and that's where I feel that I'm being directed.
Good evening. My name is Allison Smith, and I'm a student at White Station High School, and I'm a daughter. I'm a poet. I'm a youth activist, and above all else, I am a learner and a grower. And one thing that I would like to just shed light on is that I am an MMI, it's Memphis Music Initiative, and it's a nonprofit organization here that is geared toward youth in transformative means of music and social justice, if you may say. And through that, I've just been using my bones tirelessly to give students like me a voice and a platform that they can use expressively in anything they want to do. And that's it.
Thank you. So each of us at this table and in the audience make up the history of Memphis. So each of your stories are chapters in the story, in the collective story of Memphis. And thank you for sharing everything you did, Frank, your story about your family. I mean, that's just, I've heard it, and then to hear it, it's heart-wrenching, and it's something that's not discussed. And so we're here to discuss the 200th anniversary, the bicentennial of Memphis. What is one event that has shaped the story of Memphis for you? And why does that event resonate with you?
I think the story of Ida B. Wells. I listened to that, from the elders in my family growing up. Of course, being from South Memphis, you know where people's grocery was. And then they go back and teach almost right next to their location. But what got me about it was, we have this narrative now where black people don't know how to do anything, which is one of the biggest lies ever told. Black people always knew how to dig in deep and use what they had. What the Mouse brothers did was, you can't go to the white store, so we're going to create our own. And not only did they create their own, but it was successful. And just to have somebody come along and attack that, just that necessity. They weren't trying to do anything underhanded. They were just trying to provide a service. And there was this attack on black excellence, that even inspired Ida B. Wells. These were her friends. And so she goes and says, well, I can't sit back and let, something like this happen, because these were my friends. And all they wanted to do was make a better living, not only for themselves, but for the community that they served. And I think that story right there shaped so much about Memphis for me, because it told me that, we are a phenomenal people, but that greatness is always attacked, and it's just attacked because it is. So it's not anything that we can do or any other way that we can dance. It was just outright hatred and jealousy that caused that attack. And I think that story shapes me so much more about the city of Memphis, because it just shows our ingenuity. It shows what we can do, but it also shows that we have to watch out, because there are other people that are jealous of what we're able to do.
That story has been one that has resonated with me for a very long time, of the three black businessmen who were managed to open the People's Grocery Store. And then not only that of Ida B. Wells, as Tammy mentioned earlier, her strength, her fortitude in facing injustice here in Memphis and writing about those lynchings. So they were attacked because they wanted to be independent businessmen. And because Ida B. Wells supported the idea that black people should leave Memphis, as Thomas More said, leave Memphis and go west. There's no justice for them here. So Ida B. Wells wrote those words, and because she did, and black people left by the thousands, then she was she was hunted down. But fortunately, she was out of the city when they went to lynch her. But that's why she never came back to Memphis. But she was courageous, and in case some of you did not know, they just named a major street in downtown Chicago for Ida B. Wells last week. But yes. But Ida B. Wells is a name that all school children need to know. All women need to know, because she was courageous. She stood up against injustice, and she even stood up against people in our own community who thought she was speaking out too strongly. But she stood her ground. So that story has really been motivating for me, because she was a woman, and they thought she was out of her place for taking a leadership role, but that did not matter with her. But she continued her anti-lynching crusade even after she went north. Another part of Memphis history that has shaped my history and my life has been the civil rights movement. From 1960, when my sister Ernestine participated in the very first sit-in here in Memphis at the Memphis Public Library. There was only one library that African Americans could go to. That was the Cossack Library for Negroes. So those students who went to the Cossack Library and the main branch library, Peabody Library, and sat in, they were all put in jail, about 40 of them, and my sister Ernestine was one of those. So after she sat in, that was the start of the modern civil rights movement. I would say that Ida B. Wells and her crusade was an earlier civil rights movement here in Memphis. But right here, with those students taking a chance, and in spite of the fact that they were arrested, and that started the movement here in Memphis. And of course, those sit-ins spread to other locations, the museums, the art galleries, the movie theaters, and all of that. And as a teenager, I participated in whatever sit-ins or protests that were going on during that time. Everything on Main Street was segregated, as you know. All of the public facilities were segregated, even the waiting rooms at the bus station and the train station, you name it. Everything was segregated. So I sat in all of those, along with my other family members. There are 7 girls and 7 boys in my family. The 7 girls were very active, and we were all, 7 of us were put in jail at different times. So that shaped my life, being a part of the civil rights movement. Of course, we were threatened. Whatever happened, it didn't matter, but we knew that we were going to continue to be involved in the protest. I went on to Lemoyne College after high school and continued to protest, go to class, sit in, go to jail, go to class, sit in, march, picket, protest, whatever. All of those things. But it was necessary because no one was going to change any laws unless there was pressure brought to bear on the segregated institutions of this city. But when I thought about people in our past who suffered during worse times that we were going through, then there was no way that I was going to give up. So those are the kinds of things that have really shaped my life. And when I came back to Memphis, after kind of being run out because they wouldn't give me a job in Memphis, I had to go somewhere else to get a job. Came back later, but I knew that this history needed to be told.